Well, good afternoon, everyone. Really many thanks to Ryan and Scott, and congratulations on this first standalone edition of the Media Innovation Festival at the IPI. And when I heard Ryan and Scott speaking, one of the features that stood out was first, it's great to be back in Vienna. I remember the discussions from last year at the intersection of press freedom and media innovation. And I remember really appreciating how intrinsically bound they are and influence each other. And it was fantastic, or at least heartening, to see Gaza front and center on the main stage. And we also talked about media innovation in a context like Ukraine that has experienced long-term conflict and several invasions. And then so much has happened since. Where do I start? 2026 already appears to be a tough battlefield for those of us who are mitigating, mediating, trying to convey contextual realities of communities that are under attack. And the speakers here today for this opening panel are operating within three such really fraught yet highly dynamic landscapes. And I've been impressed to hear about the remarkable amount of accountability, civic mobilization, and participation, engagement that you are creating amid these conflicts, but these wars of narratives as well, right? Hiba, you and your team at Daraj Media are very much part of our community at Report for the World, and I'm really pleased that you're able to make it here, especially given the devastating conflict in Lebanon and the continuing occupation of the south of Lebanon by Israeli forces. You have traversed quite a distance. I can appreciate that your calling and your career must have transformed dramatically over the last few years. Could you share the story of where you were in terms of your work when these conflicts started to, intensify, and how the nature of your work has transformed since then, and how you look at media innovation within that context?
Hello, everyone. I'm Hiba from Daraj Media. I transitioned to the role of Impact and Innovation Lead in 2023. So basically, I've been with Daraj for 6 years now. We've been through a lot together. Unfortunately, starting, for example, with the Beirut explosion, and then following the economic recession, and after that there was the sinking of the refugee boats, the major earthquake that affected a lot of people in Syria and in Turkey, and then there's like the Gaza genocide, and then there's the Lebanese war. So, and then the falling of the Assad regime. I mean, if you think about all those things and how significant they are to the, so it was quite intense. So I started as an impact tracker because I understood that the work that we were doing was moves past beyond traditional metrics, basically, and we had to tell people that, okay, that maybe an investigation was getting like few likes and whatnot by certain people, but those people most of the time were very influential, and they ended up like moving the needle in the actual world and in the real spaces. So it started there, and then during the war in 2024, it was my second Israeli war, but as a Lebanese, but it was the first one where I was, I had agency, I felt, to do stuff. So a part of the tracking is basically tracking the war itself, because there was like a psychological warfare that was accompanying the actual war that was happening. So through basically looking about all the evac threats that were put out there, I was tracking the time of the evac threat, and then like the time of the hits, and then the number of buildings. So I was very much hands-on, and they told me this is because of the adrenaline, because it was my first war. So I was able to prove the psychological effect, which is the fact that they were creating patterns and then breaking them once we get this toxic comfort of like, okay, now I'm anxious, I have fear because like from a certain hour, and I'm expecting a hit or whatnot. So I transferred the skill set basically to do that. And then in 2025, we started working on a crowdfunding campaign. And in that crowdfunding campaign, the messaging was very important. It was important to take our impact past the newsroom and past the people that we work with to the audience. So they understand really, because there's a lot of noise outside, right? So you need to tell people, and okay, we did this, but this resulted in this. And it was very helpful because the results from this campaign were very promising to capitalize on. And also we faced, because Daraj does investigative journalism, and some of it are local, so we investigated the financial corruption in Lebanon, so very powerful people were after us. So they started a very solid campaign. This one felt different because it was financially like super solid, and it covered different mediums, whether it was on TV, on social media, WhatsApp groups. It was a full motion. So tracking the patterns of narratives is something I did, but we also worked with different partners that are more on the tech side, for example, to track the AI bots that were also pushing for a certain narrative on X, and also the hashtags that was supporting the same narrative. So we produced a report that proved the coordination behind this, and we proved like who funds whom and like the entire trail.
So your experience really takes the concept of, journalists learn best by doing, sort of doing to learn. And Zain, when you hear some of Hiba's descriptions, I mean, quite rapid escalation of hostilities. Pakistan has experienced this, but the current restrictive landscape for journalism is more of a, if I may call it that, a slow motion disaster, something that I can relate to being in an Indian context. Could you maybe also share your journey, being primarily an editor at Dawn, and then having to really transform your thinking towards media innovation and understanding what your communities need and how to reach them?
Hello. Yeah. So I've been editor of Dawn's website for about the past 8 months now. Before that, I was on the editorial board for the publication. I returned to Dawn after a while. I was working in a rival publication as digital editor, but wanted to take a break. And my return to Dawn kind of coincided with the fall of the PTI government back in 2022. That's important because, when I started writing editorials for Dawn takes its independence very seriously. It really likes to speak to power, right? And in the beginning, we went all out because we saw the actors who were behind the fall of the government as doing it in not very democratic or legal ways. And we would publish editorials almost on a daily basis criticizing the new actors that were taking over, the methods they'd employed to do it. And we kept calling out this slide kind of towards totalitarianism and restriction. And initially, people didn't take it seriously enough, I think. The warning signs were all there, but nobody was really doing much about it because the last government had also been a bit unpopular. I mean, they didn't have the best democratic credentials, so to speak. But over time, we've seen that really accelerate, right? Especially since last year, since Pakistan and India had a conflict. The Pakistani state came out much stronger in the sense that entire environment allowed the powerful forces within the establishment, within the state, to kind of clamp down on media freedoms completely, right? I mean, that's what a state of war, I think, does as well, right? You're not allowed to question a lot of the things that are happening, a lot of the things that are being done, and that kind of has also accelerated for us, as a publication that really cherishes its independence. The kind of clamp down, the financial restrictions, the journalistic restrictions that come with it, because most of Pakistani media, if I would say so, was quick to fall in line. Dawn was not. We tried to hold out, we tried to resist, and that put a target on our back. eventually what they did was, I know that, the media the world over has been going through this transformation brought about by technology, by the rise of social media and everything. We were facing those pressures as well. But what the state kind of did was it tried to completely preclude any other sources of funding to come into Dawn. Like, so even independent advertisements, they would call up advertisers and tell them not to place ads in our paper, which ultimately, eventually, just ended up, financially choking us off completely. And these are kind of also the circumstances in which I took over as editor of Dawn.com about in August last year. And immediately, I was tasked with finding a way out, right? And so one of the first things that we did, and I was kind of quite lucky to come across this book. It was someone recommended it. I think everybody in the industry, in the journalism industry, should really go over it. It's called The Content Trap, right, by Bharat Anand. I believe he's a professor at Harvard. What it does is it essentially tells you not to look at journalism as something that is, driven by content, but to look at the connections you have with your readers, the connections you have between the different types of content that you offer, and try to understand what makes them work, so that when you start innovating, when you start, reorienting, when you start re-strategizing, you're doing it for the right reasons, not just because, you're willing to put, more content out, or a different type of content out, or a more unique form of content out. And I think that's really helped us because, we're very big, we're very old, but we kind of never really sorted this the monetization bit out anyway, ever. I mean, one of the reasons was the money kept flowing in from the government. There used to be a lot of advertisements back in the day, and that kind of distracted us from never having to pay attention to this. But now that we're in this bind where we really need to make it work for ourselves, we have to go back to the principles, kind of figure out what is it that really makes us work, what is it that really makes us who we are, and then kind of build up on it in newer, different, more modern ways.
And I know that you've been doing quite a bit of work around analyzing your audiences and looking at what it is that has been missing and what is monetizable. And a lot of what you're talking about also speaks to the experiences of a lot of our media partners who did excellent journalism but had, specific types of revenue coming in. And what we're doing at Report for the World is supporting these entities that produce solid journalism with a combination of media innovation roles, so revenue, impact, AI integration specialists. And of course, this is going to take some time to yield the results. But even to set up and sustain this infrastructure, we need a level of predictability, right? A level of security. Now, Teo, in Georgia, unfortunately, the trend has gone in the opposite direction with regressive media laws, violence against journalists. I actually read that the country fell from being 77th in 2022 in the Press Freedom Index to 135th in 2026. That's quite a sharp decline. Amid that context, you've set up this fantastic network called Studio Monitor. Could you describe that and also your own journey going from an investigative journalist and starting to appreciate how important innovation is for you in Georgia?
Thank you. First of all, it's an honor being here with these colleagues, and despite of everything, you are serving the public and resist. And our story, Sinatle Media, which is the network, sustainability and solidarity network. I think it was the kind of collective response to the restriction. And it's a story about resistance and endurance. And I think we inherited it from our colleague, Mzia Maglobeli, who is political prisoner in Georgia, winner of Sakharov Prize. And from the courtroom, she told us that fight before it's too late. So basically, everything started in 2023 when Georgian government introduced so-called Russian law. to label the civil society and journalists as agents. And the first response of independent Georgian media was that we did not register as agent. But then they kind of introduced another law, because they told us that, okay, if you did not like the Russian law, here is the American law, FARA law, copy-paste of it. So, and you know that if you violate this law, there is imprisonment up to 6 years. And the response again and resistance was that, okay, there is a lobbying law and we serve the public, so it's not about us. And the final and the most challenging one's law about the foreign grants, and with the new amendments, here is the up to 6 years imprisonment again. So what happened was that what was the goal? Goal was that to kind of shut down all the independent media outlets in Georgia who were fully dependent on the foreign grants, because basically we didn't use any political money, any business money, so this was the main source for us. So even though we knew how the situation was difficult for us, we quickly realized that, okay, we need to kind of unite and resist together. This was when Sinatle Media network kind of born, and Sinatle in Georgian means light. And our first campaign was "The light must stay on," and basically what I love about Sinatle is that in our network, we have 22 media outlets, but not only from the Tbilisi-based, I mean capital-based media outlets, but everyone from the regions. For example, we have in our network small local media outlets which producing the content in Azerbaijani, Armenian language. We have niche media, investigative media outlets, and Studio Monitor is one of them. I represent this media in the network, and I think this diversity is our strengths, and because we already seen different types of scenarios in other countries, like in Russia and I don't know, in Belarus, we were sure that this network and this solidarity is the only way to survive in this environment.
And I also love how you describe media innovation for you is not just forming a new source of revenue, it is resistance. And I think that's actually part of the title of a discussion by Midan tomorrow, really looking forward to that. And Hiba, when you hear Teo talking about these networks, I'm sure at least part of it resonates with your experience at Daraj, right? The idea of coalitions and collaborations providing deeper impact and exposure for your work in this moment. Could you share a few of those collaborations and how these networks are not just a form of greater exposure, they're also a form of protection, aren't they?
Yeah, so basically in 2017 when Daraj was found, we started working on cross-border investigations as the first thing, as the initiation of the content. Then came the local work on the inside. So working with partners has always been a strategy for us. And this grew a lot, and the network grew a lot over the years, because first we were covering financial corruption through like Paradise Papers, then came the Pegasus, then afterwards like we had a lot of different themes basically to the investigation. So the network grew by size, but also by specialty, right? Like you have environmental experts, you have people that are specializing in finance, other in human centric stories and whatnot. And then, yeah.
Syria Papers, just don't forget to mention that one because that's particularly interesting.
Yeah. So after so we started working on Syria in 2017. It's not a new country for us to unlock. So we already had the workflows in place, partnerships in place, and whatnot. But what helped us is that we directly understood that after the falling of the Assad regime, there was like a huge amount of papers that we need to work on, and Daraj alone cannot do that. We needed our partners to accelerate the process, right? So we had people also from like legal teams, civil society, and whatnot, very much involved in the investigation, and Siraj, that are our Syrian partners. So this was as a form of like content development and how to move forward in that space. But there's also the coalitions of independent media, because we understood that whatever happened in 2025, first of all, it's not the first incident, but it was the most intense one, and it's staying. it's something that we're going to have to face constantly, because we're going to still do our job, and it's going to make very powerful people very mad. So we started with the coalition of independent media, which includes other media organizations, but also talents that can weigh in on how to work on, instead of playing like defense, we play offense, which is instead of debunking whatever they throw out there, we start our pre-bunking. So yeah, no. Because the thing is, like the smear campaign that they did was accompanied by SLAP, which is the basically when they start throwing at you lawsuits,
yeah,
like the strategic
Counsel.
lawsuits, against public participants. So they did that quite aggressively. However, nothing in that space was targeted against a certain content we published. It wasn't about what the investigation had. It was just like depleting resources and yeah. So there's so the serious.
Can you tell us about pre-bunking? What does that look like in practice? How are you a couple of steps ahead?
Yeah. So
and how do coalitions help with that as well?
Definitely. So as part of investigations that we already did, which is like shadow persons, for example, and Pandora papers, and like the investigation of Riyad Salemi, a lot of names popped in that investigation. But we prioritized things that we felt, at the time it was important for them to be published, but we still had the database. So through a shared database with different media, we are working on basically creating a pool where everybody can access, not everybody, people part of the coalition can access and develop content based on that.
And I imagine, and I want to get back to you with this, when you have those shared sort of data repositories, there's also a monetization value to that. But I also wanted to ask you, Zain, when you it's interesting that Syria has climbed up the ladder with the press, with the ranking, with the Press Freedom Index, but there are alarming, I suppose, trends with human rights, treatment of minorities and women, and also attacks against the press. Again, India and Pakistan, the subcontinent, has been quite familiar with this sort of confusing mixed record, right, Zain? And for you, you had mentioned at dawn, there has been quite a bit of economic pressure. That's a way by which, they try to silence independent media voices, but it's kind of compelled you in a direction towards revenue diversification. Where are you finding most traction? Where do you spend your efforts these days in terms of creating these specialized, the type of thing that Hiba mentioned, specialized data that is useful not to just general audiences, but other people in, adjacent sectors?
So one of the most specific audience subgroups that we're looking to target is, ironically, Dawn is also one of the most popular publications among the state bureaucracy. It's apparently part of their curriculum to read Dawn while they're preparing for their civil superior service exam. Yeah. So, I was actually looking at numbers right before I headed over here. And that's, annually around 16 to 17,000 people sit for the exam. Very few of them pass. But potentially that's 16, 17,000, potential subscribers if you can come up with a service that specifically caters to their needs. So one of the things that we've kind of been trying to drill down into is what specifically they use Dawn for. So we've understood that they use it for, to brush up on their general knowledge skills, but they're also using it to build their vocabulary, because apparently in Pakistan, Dawn's looked up to as this one publication that has been great at written journalism, right? So one of the features that we want to roll out very soon is, to help, because Pakistan is obviously not an English language native speaking country, to allow these young students who are sitting for this exam to double click a word and, find its meaning. And, that really helps them, develop their writing skills, etc. But that is kind of, that is one specific, subgroup within our audiences that we're, focusing on targeting in the coming months. Other than that, there's also researchers. Dawn has been around for a while. It has a very deep archive. It's kind of documented the entire history of this country that it's in. And we need to figure out a way to digitize our archives in a manner, use modern tools to make it searchable, not just by topic, but by through more natural language searches. And we do feel that that's something that's going to be very valuable, not just to universities and students, but also to researchers who are sitting outside who try and map out the trajectory that Pakistan's been following.
And I'd love to exchange notes, because we've been doing similar sort of mappings of different audiences, including diaspora, because there's a lot of Indian and Pakistani diaspora in the UK and the US, and with the Lebanese, the diaspora is larger in number than the audience and citizens inside the country. So this is also a potential source of revenue, but they might want different type of narratives than someone living inside the country. And we've seen a lot of interest towards events, experiences. And Teo, you hosted some really interesting events in Georgia, including a flea market sort of setting. Who are the people who have sort of come out and surprised you and helped you make them successful? How would you want to kind of repeat those kind of events? What will that require?
Yeah, so Sinatle Media network kind of stands on the big army of supporters, but it's not only through donations. People are helping us in different ways. For example, they are voluntarily reaching us and give us a space for our events, for example, or they are willing to help us to write a strategy for the network. So it's really variety of the things they are giving us, and basically to explain the kind of solidarity, what's not only inside the network but outside of the network. I'll just give you the one example. So when we decided to create this network, we quickly realized that, okay, we're journalists, we know how to do an investigation or cover, uncover the nepotism stories, but we don't know how to deal with these problems. So first I realized that I need someone who will help us to kind of guide through these difficult times. And first person came to my mind was my sister, who is from the from the business industry, but the huge supporter of Georgian media outlets because during student time she was working one of the media outlets, who is the part of our network right now. And I approached her and asked, are you ready to help for independent Georgian media? And Katie is now the CEO of Sinatle Media, who is working pro bono for us because she had a paid job, full-time paid job. But what happened was that basically Katie collected people around Sinatle, I don't know, marketers, lawyers, people who are willing to help us in digital security, and in many directions. But thing is that I all the time telling these stories to explain the solidarity inside the network as well. When we started this campaign, the Light Must Stay On, in 1 month we collected 45,000 Georgian lari, which is quite a big money in Georgia. We're the poor country. And what happened was that Tbilisi-based media outlets gave their shares to the regional ones because they were more vulnerable, unsecure during that time. And it was a big act of solidarity because no one was in a good position that time. So for me, Sinatle is not only about money. It's about how we encourage each other, because sometimes, I don't know, my colleague from other media outlets has kind of, mood change and that everything is over, but we encourage them, and sometimes this person is me, because all the time Georgian government is trying to kind of make new amendments in the law. And what happened, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we had the Tbilisi International Book Fair. And publishers kind of invited us on this book fair as a special guest. And publishers is the only industry which openly support the Georgian media. And why is that? Because they told us that the first is the media, and the second step is to censor the literature. So they are the only ones. And about you mentioned the flea market and stuff like that. So during the Christmas time, we art collectors and also the people from this sector donated approximately 100 art pieces. And we held the auction, and all this on the same day we had a huge flea market, and people were selling their belongings for us, and we collected 100,000 lari, which is quite a big money for. I think it was 1 day flea market and a couple of days for the auction because it was online as well. And after this, when we declared, okay, we collected that much money, pro-government TV station started non-stop smear campaign against us, as if we, foreign agent, received 17 million outside of the country, which was, yeah, we wish. Yes, but I know why they did it, because they saw a huge solidarity around the Georgian media, independent Georgian media.
Essentially trying to break that up, yes. and I mean you threw out so many gems with those examples. So one of the things that you're doing very organically without thinking about it is creating a media ecosystem of support, so that, as you said, the most vulnerable newsrooms, when they're in that situation, they can be saved so that good journalism can be preserved. But you also mentioned something that, we'd been talking about earlier today, Hiba, which is certain roles that are often not present in the newsroom. So, I mean, your sister was fantastic to join your team, coming from a business background. So there are often these fractional executives, financial sort of officers, or actually another important role we talked about, which is a managing director who can actually operationalize and systemize this event that you did so that you don't have to start from scratch again. These roles are often missing, which is where a lot of the innovations, sort of stopped short. And our fantastic partner, Suli Climate Exchange, has been helping us convene or leading a cohort of impact fellows, and Hiba, you're among them, and the whole concept of an impact strategist is relatively new. Could you tell us a bit about how you've your role has changed over the last couple of years, but also how a fellowship like this helps you kind of structure? How are you going to get the buy-in? How can this become a permanent, position for you?
First, I want to talk about like what Teo said, how she separated like the marketing and management and stuff like that from technically like the newsroom or the space that you operate from, to remove probably pressure of sustainability from journalists, to protect the brand and on one side, but also to have like a growth team that works towards the sustainability bit. And this is what we did at Daraj. And this is what we've been trying to apply since 2025 actually, because of the, okay, we understood, and this was a necessity. We started in 2025, and it happened to be an excellent decision after Trump came with the harsh, cuts and whatnot. So basically, yeah, we divided the editorial team and the growth team, and the impact team works across both, right? Because like there's part of the impact that we do is very much editorial, in the sense that you need to design it before the story and make it more intentional and more direct rather than just measure it afterwards. And there's the part that has to do with the business growth, which is, okay, like there's impact, we see it, how can we monetize it, and how can we like grow further, whether in community and finances and whatnot. So I joined the fellowship in November, and it has been a great experience simply because I've been working in impact for 3 years now. But I did stuff just because I knew logically it made sense. So we first started with like a very basic sheet from ProPublica that we ended up developing because we needed, we saw that there's like a lot of more information that needs to be integrated in that system. But it was more on the tracking side. The investigative side, they were already, they learned as they were going, right? Like where to take an investigation, who to start a conversation with, and whatnot. So what I'm gonna do basically in the Impact Lab is reverse engineer what worked in the newsroom, add to it the expertise and the experts that now we are working with, in order to like have a very clear impact strategy within the newsroom.
And that makes perfect sense, because as journalists, we often tend to react really well and we're agile, but bringing in intentionality and then saying, what is the structure that can replicate this, systemize this? I'm sure you spent a lot of your time, Zain, thinking about that. And it's a different experience, isn't it? Because you're transforming from something that was a more traditional setup. What does that look like for you, this kind of distinction between the editorial and the revenue? Because sometimes the issue becomes that they get siloed, whereas they should be really working together to see what is your most monetizable content, or what formats should it be in. How are you approaching it so that you can prevent these silos? Because it's a larger newsroom, isn't it? How many people are at Dawn?
So in our web newsroom specifically?
Overall.
Overall, I mean, with print and digital combined, I think we're more than 150. But digital only, it's closer to 30. I mean, it changes a bit seasonally. And it's actually one of the most fundamental challenges I've faced since taking over. Because as journalists, you're not really taught business ever, right? You're not taught strategy. You're not taught about how to, monetize your product. You're taught to focus on how to deliver a story, which is factually sound and properly investigated. And but nobody ever really tells you about how you're going to sell it, right? So that's been one of the more major changes that I've kind of been working on over the past 2 years, and again, there's a shortage in the industry as well. Like you're not taught the news media business. I don't think I may be wrong, but I tried to find programs for it, and I think there were only very few in the world. So traditionally that used to work. You used to have a sales and marketing department, and you used to have a management team, and then you had editorial to focus on editorial tasks. But now, I don't think you can do that anymore, because the newsroom is the best placed. You're interacting with these tools, you're interacting with these new technologies every day. You're in the best position to kind of figure out how I can, deliver this story, for example. in a way that would actually be compelling for readers as well, or would want to, make them subscribe to your publication, etc. Marketing sales is not really very well placed to do that job anymore, I feel. I mean, they were more used to going out to advertisers, soliciting them for, to run campaigns on your publications, etc. But how do you get them to sign on for, let's say, for example, EVs are becoming a big thing in Pakistan. Pakistan's gone through a very rapid solar transition because of the energy crisis, etc. One of our sales team came to us one day saying that this one big, electric vehicle manufacturing company wants to do a series of articles with us. And I asked them what articles, like what are they planning to do? And unfortunately, they didn't even have a plan. I was like, you should be looking bigger. You should be thinking about all the banks that are financing EVs. You should be looking at the wider industry as well. Then you should be looking at companies that are providing the charging infrastructure, and let's do a whole series of things around them, right? Let's do a whole series which is going to be informative for readers, because a lot of people, including me, have been searching how to make a switch from these ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, to an EV vehicle, and how does, let's take them through that entire journey, finding a bank that's willing to finance it, which type of EV, new electric vehicle technology is best for them. Is it a plug-in? Is it a fully battery electric? And then let's go forward and, let's create an entire ecosystem, and that'll have a longer shelf life as well. They haven't gotten back to me yet. So, that's why I think that, journalists need to be leading these conversations now. They are best placed. They are in a position to actually even understand these new opportunities better. And I think if we were to, be in the room when where the money-making decisions are happening, I think we would be able to extract much more value for ourselves out of it.
100%, because you're sitting atop a lot of this rich data, and the great thing about AI innovation and the pace at which it's becoming sophisticated is that you get to repackage a lot of that information and even create specialized experiences, services, publications, what have you, for these different clients. And you can also map out who these possible clients are with a lot more easily than before. And that's a great example. And another one that comes to mind is in the legal, to do with the legal sector, where Hiba, you'd mentioned that you'd been looking at actually providing legally admissible material, sort of like ready to go to different organizations. Can you tell us a bit about how do you arrive at that point where it is in that format? And have you found ways of monetizing that? Who are the people who are in need of that kind of material?
So basically, we involve a lawyer from the very beginning. Whenever we are working on an investigation, they are very much on board about the topics that we are working on, but also the framing that they are in, the evidence that's inside the piece, and whatnot. So because there's a lot of legal procedure that goes to it, yeah. So basically, this is how we did it. Yani. It's just like involving cross-functional people into pieces in a way where they can actually make them interoperable. You don't have to exert another layer for this to become something that you can action. So the piece of literature already has action elements inside it.
And what type of legal material is it? Is it in a conflict setting where it is evidence of certain type of war crimes? What are we talking? Who are the people who can benefit from this kind of information? Are you looking at who those audiences or clients are?
Basically, in the local lens, we were talking to... So the investigation of Riyad Salemi that we did, which is the governor of the Lebanese bank that actually played a huge part in the recession, there were two things that we did. We involved the local team, legal team, because he had a trail of money that we needed to follow, basically. But also we involved the team outside Lebanon, which was in Switzerland. They are accountability now. They also work on the legal part of the investigation outside Lebanon, because the legal system here in Lebanon was corrupt, So we started working on accountability outside the borders, and there, we had our content helped in evidence building for having his assets frozen. He had Interpol warrants also flagged against him. So it started with that, basically.
That's a powerful example. And Teo, when you hear Zain and Hiba throughout these examples, what would be something like that that is sort of prized data, that is, you know, rich, that is important to both for public interest, but also there'll be kind of, you know, niche audiences that will want that?
I have very interesting observation on the book fair, and if I may, I can share. So we had this huge tent on the book fair, and we had this very interesting interactive space for our readers and supporters with screening investigations. Our readers had chance to meet with the journalists, tell their stories. It was quite interesting. And during these 4 days, we collected 12,000 lari. And people kind of freely donated money. And what was my observation? So people, for example, donated one-time donation, for example, 100 lari, without any hesitation, but they didn't make decision to become a monthly subscriber, even though we asked them to pay only 5 lari per month, which is way more less than 100 lari one-time donation. Basically, I don't have an answer on this, but I assume that in this very non-stable environment in the country, people are kind of afraid to take responsibilities, like constant responsibilities. So our main challenge right now in Sinatle is to kind of transform our supporters to a monthly subscribers. It's quite challenging in our case. So this is what we are working on right now. And also another challenge is our business. So they are really afraid of the regime. And they try to avoid independent media, to take advertisement to the Sinatle Media. It's a political for them, because I think regime and our ruling party see this act as a political act. So they are afraid of independent media. But I think our biggest kind of, let's say, win is that since 2023, we don't have any exile media in Georgia. And my biggest hope is that never will.
And so in that sense, there is strength in numbers and there's security in numbers. And you've talked about this before as well, that you're working on creating that culture among your audiences and communities that one needs to pay or be committed to receive good information. And that takes a while. And I think this applies to the subcontinent, this applies to Lebanon. So that consistency becomes important. Do we have till 6? Yeah. Great. I think it would be great to get some questions from audiences. I have a whole list here and I can keep going through it, but it'd be lovely to hear from other newsroom leaders, support organizations.
Hi, thank you. So I would like to ask, what does the impact manager, what are your responsibilities in the organization? Can you tell me more about that?
I can speak for hours. So basically, as an impact person, you have like multiple hats that you wear. And I will refer back to because the best way to actually tell you what I do is to refer to the impact lab, because up until a certain point, nobody understood, and why am I talking about community building? Why am I over there like trying to understand how the story is being ideated? So, I was doing a bit of everything. So basically, first of all, it's to start a conversation of impact, to remind journalists of the agency that they have, and that posting and publishing a story is only the beginning of what's supposed to happen, and it's not the world's problem to like take this further, or like impact is not something we hope for, it's something that we actually can design inside the newsroom. So there's this part of it which is very much reflecting on the values, on the mission and the vision, and keep them present in designing a story. There's the other part, which is how do I look at the audience, and like I can't continue dividing the audience based on demographics, because like the audience are, you know, people that behave in a certain way and overwhelmed by certain things, have certain interests. So we look into the psychographic division of audience rather than sticking to the common metrics that we used to do before. The second one is community building, is actually to create communication channels that are already established, so that, for example, if you're publishing a piece about gender, let's say, you already know the WhatsApp group that you want to amplify this content in, and like you already know the civil society that's working on it, so you can transfer and communicate to those people specifically, either pre-publication, that this is about to come out and whatnot, or post-publication, depending on the nature of it. And there's also the community thing, which Teo was talking about. What we're trying to create online, you created in person, and this is why people felt connected to you more in person, to like give you those big donations. You know, online it's hard to like keep the sustainability of this going, and this is why it and the trust in media. They're afraid that if we publish something that doesn't align with them and whatnot. So those are barriers we're trying to cross as well in community.
So when we said that light was connected to the independent media, there was no question of it. And when we started this campaign, the Light Must Stay On, we had this couple of hours blackout on our web pages, and when we came back with the same video, we explained why without light, truth also disappears. And this campaign kind of make a wave of solidarity, not only inside the country, but outside of the country. For example, I don't know, immigrants in other cities, New York, Berlin, London, they made events for us. They were selling their belongings on Facebook, or sometimes they posted as best they wish to donate for the Sinatle. So it was really, really important for us to see your audience as your supporter, because I remember journalists were so surprised when they saw this kind of, you know, constant solidarity among them. And I don't want to make impression that the Sinatle Media kind of solved all the problem, because unemployment in our industry just skyrocketed. Journalists are working without salaries. We lost journalists in our newsrooms, and it's a disaster for us. But at the same time, journalists became really creative. For example, my colleagues who is in the audience right now, and she launched, I don't know, 15 years ago, a small community radio in ethnic minorities in Georgia. They started to make a small tour guides in their town. And for the book fair, they prepared tea boxes with this all the ingredients and small, lovely traditional cups, and the recipe how to prepare the tea with the Azerbaijani kind of style. And it was the best seller of the book fair. So thank you, Camilla, for this innovative approach. And this money is really basic. They paid the bills with this money, and you know, it's even not salaries sometimes.
I love the humanness that you bring to impact and community, but also you're only now scratching the surface of, you know, all of us here know the power of remittance economy across the world. So we haven't even started to really map out what would a migrant worker who's not from a wealthy background, what would they want? Because maybe their individual contribution might be small. but they're large in numbers, right? So that's really exciting. And just to plug in for the panel tomorrow on impact, it's all about impact, and it connects to what CXC Suli SYLI Impact Lab is doing with 5 of our fellows across the world. So if you want to learn more about like sort of this evolving definition of an impact strategist, they will have perspectives from different country contexts. Anyone else?
Thank you. Firstly, it's very exciting. Like Zain said, we are not taught as business people. Either we are taught as event managers. So I'm very curious to know, Theo, how big is do you have a division of growth and editorial? Who does the event organizing? And how do you make sure these are the supporters, these are your audience, who are your supporters, should be in that event? What is that process like?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, my sister, who is helping us, is from the business sector, and it's quite challenging to work all the time with pro bono people because they have constant full-time jobs. And it's quite challenging because you are all the time trying to find their free time. Are you free this evening for the meeting? We are planning huge event for the next, week, or after 2 weeks. But in our case, even though it's challenging, it's working so far. I don't know what happens in 2 years later. Maybe these people will be exhausted and, maybe not, but it's still working. So, for example, when we organize something, my sister has the list of volunteers, people from a marketing background, videographers, people who are helping us to make a small strategy for the event, and then we connect these people. Are you free? We are thinking about to make 4 days interactive events for the book fair, for example. And in this case, we find the people for each event. It's not like that we have all the time these people around. So this is the most challenging part in our case. And then as soon as we have their approval, we start everything together. So executive team is my sister. I'm the chair of the board. So in the board, we are all the journalists. So we only involve in very big issues, not the everyday, because we are journalists, we are doing our job. But it doesn't mean that it's not all the time hustling. Yeah, all the time. Without us, it's not happening because we need to involve in these events, right? We need to, for example, 4 days we were living in their book fair. From 8 to 8, 12 hours a day to meet our audience, to be present for them. Because in this regime, we met people who are afraid to donate online. Because thinking about the idea that your donation might be used against you, it's not easy things. And also one of the challenges for the supporters is that they are willing to help you and they are not afraid of the regime. But in the country, there are so many people asking for help, starting from the healthcare to the, political prisoners, that it's very difficult to find the way through our audience, which is quite poor. So up until now, just one word. So up until now, we collected approximately 260,000 Georgian lari, which is approximately $100. It's not much, big amount of money, but in our case, because it's only from our readers, from our society, it's quite a lot.
Thank you for that. Ryan, did you have a last question or one more?
Sorry, this is for you, Zain. I wanted to understand how you're trying to use. Are you paywalled?
Not yet, but
Not
we
yet,
wish
okay.
to be.
Okay, good. So I wanted to understand how you're using your archive and AI there, therefore, but also how you're planning to monetize your archive, because that's a very interesting case study.
So one of the first things that needs to be accomplished, I mean, we have digitized our archive in a manner in that the digitization has been done in a very old school way. So all the PDFs are available in a digital format, but that's not very useful these days, right? You want people to be able to search by topic, search by person, event, etc. That's the second stage. I mean, so we right now the first order of business would be to, get some kind of OCR, tool that can speed that process up so that it becomes useful for ordinary people as well. Right now, unless you know the exact date and the exact the topic or the exact topic you're looking for, it's very difficult to find relevant information. That is essentially what we plan to do. And once that's done, yes, then you can introduce this as a paid service, because obviously this is not something that everybody is going to be using. Mostly researchers, students, etc. So you can you can charge a significant premium for it as well, because there's no other place where this information is available, at least in Pakistan. Does that answer your question?
Fantastic. Well, I think that is a wrap. Thank you for these inspiring and very practical suggestions around media innovation. I know the audiences would want to continue these conversations over drinks and dinner, so stay on.